Hey everybody, welcome to the Married People Podcast, where we want to make marriage real, fun, and simple. This week we're talking about the question, how do I help my spouse with the loss of a loved one? I'm CJ, and as always, I'm sitting here with Afton.
Hi.
And I'm sitting here with Ted.
Hey everybody.
And today on the Married People Podcast, we are talking about something that's pretty heavy.
It is heavy. It is heavy, because we brainstorm these a lot, right? Guys talk about what we need to talk about. And this was actually one that my wife suggested that we talk about. She goes, this has been such a huge part of our marriage. Have you guys, you've done over 50 episodes. Have you gone into this area of what to do when your spouse loses a loved one?
Yeah, and
haven't.
And we've talked to, if you've been a listener for a while, we talked to Sandy Wise, episode 25 and 26, I think it is, about what to do if your spouse is sick. And we talked to her about, hey, what happens if you lose your spouse? And that was a really, really amazing conversation and heavy conversation, and I highly recommend listening to that because it was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. But we're taking a little different approach to this area this week, and what we're talking about what to do when your spouse has lost a loved one. Maybe it's a sibling, or maybe it's a parent. Mm-hmm. So it's a little different.
Yeah, unfortunately, our spouse, at some point in our marriage, they're going to lose people that they love. Yeah. And it's so tragic, and it's such a big deal, and a lot of times it's without warning, and mm-hmm. people don't really know how to process it until they're in the middle of it trying to figure it out. So every time we're on this podcast, we're always like, how do we get ahead of the game a little bit? Because a lot of times if we just have some simple conversations, or if we've at least thought about something, just those thoughts help us to process and mm-hmm. do those times better. They're never easy, but there are definitely ways to handle it better than others.
Yeah. We were actually just talking about this week, me and Hudson, because someone we work with lost her brother last week, and we went home that day, and I was like, I just don't even know how I would handle it. Like, if someone that close to me passed away, I have no experience really with death that close to me at this point in my life. Like, I had grandparents pass away, and we've experienced those kinds of things that, depending on how close you are to your grandparents, it feels differently to you when it happens. But if it were a brother or someone that close to me, I just told Hudson, I was like, I just don't know how I would cope. I don't know how I would handle it. I don't know what I would do. I have no idea how I would handle it. Because it's so difficult, and I just don't know. I have nothing in my back pocket to say.
Right. And we know it's going to happen. These moments are going to happen in all of our lives, but yet we see friends and coworkers and that kind of thing face that. Yeah. But we still rarely take the time to pull back and think, how do I want to handle it? How should I handle it? How could I? Is it possible to in any way, shape, or form to prepare for some of those things? And while I don't think that there ever really truly is like a way to be super ready and prepared for when those times come, we can equip ourselves to be prepared to help our spouses, I think, more so when those times come. Because you don't know how you're going to feel.
Mm-hmm. You don't know what to say.
You don't know, but typically there's less emotion for one spouse than the other, right, Ted?
There can be. Or, there's the loss of a child. There's things like that that's very much a shared loss, but the principles are still the same. And it's so jarring. Afton, I think you said it perfectly. I don't know what I would do with that. And I think that's how most people respond, because there isn't a place to park that in our mental garage, right? We don't have a category for what to do with it. And it's devastating and mind blowing. And then we see somebody that we love dearly going through it. It's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like I just said, we see people go through it. We think, I don't know how I would handle it. And I think this episode is an attempt to step back and say, okay, how could you handle it? And how could you help your spouse, walk with your spouse as they process that as well?
I think depending on your spouse and their stories, this all looks differently. Like for Hudson, my husband, he lost his dad when he was 7. In a car accident, and he lost his best friend to suicide when he was a senior in high school. He lost his youth pastor in his 20s. Like, all of these, he's dealt with death more than anyone I know, like close to you death, that like the kind of death that can really shake you up. And so it's those kinds of things where, like, even last week when we were talking about this with it happened to a coworker, and it sparked this conversation with us, he was like, I just have experienced so much death at this point that he's like, it's almost like it would take someone like you, talking to me, dying for it to really like shake me again, because he just has experienced it so much that now you kind of hold everything a little bit loose. Like you hold everything very loosely because you've just experienced so much loss before, you know?
Right.
Yeah. And Ted, I know that, you know, this is something that you and Nancy have faced, and this is something you talk about in your book, Your Best Us. And that's the other thing, that another reason why we wanted to record this, because like you said, Nancy's brought this up. We should talk about this. And so I wanted to just give you the floor here and walk us through what you've been through and what you've learned through that process.
Right. So Nancy's like you, Afton. Like she has, you know, she's lost her grandparents, and they were older, and it was a blessing, to be honest. They had suffered for a really long time. And so we said death never feels right. If they'd ever felt right, it was kind of in those situations. She was still devastated, but at the same time, it seemed to make sense. The natural order of things made sense. So I have a little bit of a story like Hudson's. This whole losing people thing started really early for me. I lost my mom when I was 10, suddenly. So that kind of started that whole journey with that. And so that sort of does something to a kid that he doesn't know what's happened to him because he doesn't have a category to deal with it. And so you kind of parent yourself a little bit growing up. So there's, you know, you sort of learn to walk with a limp in many ways relationally. But I think I thought that because I had gone through that I had, only way to know how to describe it, that I had paid off the Grim Reaper is what I used to say. Like, this won't happen again.
It already happened to me.
And it felt cruel then. Yeah. So I can't imagine, you know, as a believer that it would happen again.
Yeah.
So after my mom passed away, her sister, who was just 12 years older than me, was 22 at the time, said, "I'm here for you. I'm always going to protect you. Don't you worry, you're going to be okay." And she had a baby at the time, and it was 2. So she raised us in this. It was this, in many ways. I mean, I lived with my dad. My dad, of course, raised us as well. But she was the mom figure in many ways, and then later my stepmom. But we were very, very close. And as I got older, she became more like a sister. And her son struggled with drugs and alcohol starting at 14 years old. So our role would kind of change because I was kind of in ministry, and she was kind of leaning into me going, what do we do? How can we help him? And so I've never seen a family fight for a kid like they did, but he just had a hold of him. And so we tried so many things, but he, in his mid-20s, OD'd. He passed away. And I was mortified. He was way more like a brother than he was a cousin. That's why I hate calling her aunt and I hate calling him cousin. It was way closer than that. And so especially the fight had been so fierce and so intentional. And so it was a family that was like, we're going to do this. We're going to fix, this is going to be okay. This is going to be a story of redemption. This is going to be fine. And then it had a whole different message. And then a couple of years later, she, 49 years old, gets this odd infection and passes away. You know, and she had been like a grandparent to my kids. My kids adored her. They were really confused. You know, they were 6, 4, and 2. They were really confused, especially my older one, who was smart, you know, beyond his years. Like they called her and her husband Lolly and Pop, and he was, you know, I'm trying to protect him and do all these different things. And so, but I didn't do so well. Like I felt like I changed. It's very, very quiet, very withdrawn, would save all my energy for work. We were still doing major events at our church where there were thousands of people there, and I'd have to pull everything I had to muster to create these events. They would be 3 days long. I'd give a message on these things, and then I would shut down. And grief was a weird thing for me. Did talk to a grief counselor about it, and she says to me, she said, you know, you've heard about the 5 stages of grief? And I said, yes. And she goes, I don't like those. She said, grief's more like an ocean. You never know what the day's going to bring. And I resonate way more with that than like I'm walking up these steps, because steps for me feels like once you get to the top, you're done. And I don't think grief works like that. At least it has not worked like that for me. So I would do odd things. Like I would call her cell phone and leave messages. And I told my uncle, I said, I don't want you listening to them. And if you turn that phone off, I will destroy you. Because I needed that. So a lot of times I would call on the way home and leave a message with her. And I'm mad at you for leaving me. Like all these things. And so, but I wept a lot. Like I cried enough tears to float a boat. I mean, and not around people so much. But the way this ties back into marriage is I could do that with Nancy. I could do that in front of Nancy. And the reason that we talk about it in the book is I feel like as somebody that's grieved a lot, that's been in ministry, it's done a lot of funerals, been around a lot of people with loss, I think a lot of times well-meaning spouses and people do things that unintentionally hurt the person. They're not meaning to, but it hurts. And so I told Nancy, I said, you need to write a book on how to help people who are trying to help people that are grieving, and it would be a sentence. Don't fix it. Because she would say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And then she'd pat me on the chest and she'd go, oh, your heart. I just don't know how your heart's taking it. She goes, your mom and now her, your mom and now her. And so it's like, that's all she did. She didn't try to fix it. She'd just go, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. This is so crazy. She said that often. This is so crazy. And I needed that because it was so crazy.
It feels crazy when you're in it.
Yeah. It felt so crazy. And she just acknowledged it, that it's crazy. I just can't believe this. I can't believe this. And so I was like, okay, because there would be moments where I'd feel like I'm going crazy. Right?
Right.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going crazy. So for her to acknowledge it and just pat me on the chest.
Just like validate your feelings. Yeah.
So how long did that season go on with Nancy kind of stepping in and helping you? I don't know if she helped you process, but supported you through that. Or is it something that, like to your point about the ocean waves thing, it still comes and goes and you never know what the day holds and it's just less frequent? Or how long did that last and what does that look like?
I think it lasted too long. I really do. Like I've watched, we've had some dear friends where the wife was killed in a car accident. And I've watched how their family and their adult children have handled the loss of her. And it was sudden and it was quick and it was unfair and she was 60 years old and it was all these things and it was so pointless. And so, and I've watched this family like rally around and turn it into, we're going to honor her by dedicating, donating money to a charity. And we want you to donate money to charity. And they would we're going to keep living our life and we're going to celebrate her by doing this. I was not that. I wish I had been more of that. I was sad. I was sad. I was frustrated. I was withdrawn. I would fake it with my kids because I remember asking my brother, what are we going to do? And he goes, we've got kids. We're going to fake it. And I remember thinking, he's exactly right. I got to fake this. Like I can't this was my childhood. I'm not going to let it be my kids. So I would, Daddy still played and they were little and Daddy still takes us to the movies and Daddy still giggles and tucks us in and tells us stories. And then bam, I was out. So Nancy got more the real of that.
Which I'm sure that's hard for her to watch too.
For sure.
I'm sure she had every opportunity to be like, man, I don't get any of the fun parts of your day. I get the just sad parts, which I'm sure she appreciates you being real. But
oh, for sure. That's why I say I wish it hadn't lasted so long.
Yeah.
It's for her sake. Is that because she had never dealt with it. So any reaction that I was having was normal, maybe.
Right.
She didn't know. And so I always say, I'm not the one, don't follow my model of grief, but you can follow Nancy's. Because she was so understanding and she was so available and she so allowed me to be sad and she so would fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Well, at the same time, though, Nancy also, I'm listening to your story because we haven't heard this. Afton and I haven't heard this, especially not in this kind of transparent detail, right? But at the same time, I'm hearing Nancy's filling in a lot more gaps. To Afton's point earlier, every situation is different. And a loved one might pass away and you have a bigger community around you, maybe a bigger family who's all in it together in a way. But in your story is so unique in that you have had so many parts of your family pass away. So now Nancy's almost having to fill in gaps where mom could have been a comfort, where your aunt was a comfort, but then she's gone too. It's so you know what I mean? Like she had to fill more gaps that other people who passed away could no longer fill those either.
Mm-hmm. Well said. I mean, my aunt was always the one that if anything great happened with kids, we called her. She was first call. Something great happened to work, she's the first call. Other than Nancy, like she was she was first call. And we always laughed that she loved our kids better than us now, kind of thing. And I was totally cool with that kind of thing. But it got to the point where she was so great. And then it hit me one day. I thought, I've got to stop. I've got to start living and stop focusing so much on this. And when I've seen people do it better, the Sandy Wises of the world, I kind of regret that. At the same time, it drew us together, Nancy and I, in a way that it's cements thing. And when I think about marriage and the beautiful parts, you think about what a couple sees together, the funerals, but the weddings and the births and the celebrations and all these things. And so we see those things. And I think that's the beautiful richness of marriage as we have walked through these things with each other. But I decided one day, I was just like, okay, she would slap me in the face right now. Like if she could, people say, she wouldn't want you to do this. She would not have wanted me to do this. And it took me too long to realize that. And so I was like, all right, I'm getting myself together. I'm going to stop using this as an excuse. So one night I was saying something, what I thought was funny to Nancy, and she looks and she goes, I went, are you Christian mooing at me right now? And she's like, what? And I was, that was supposed to be funny. And she got the oddest look on her face. That was supposed to be funny? Like she was so excited that potentially, oh my gosh, is he back?
He cracked a joke.
I cracked a joke. Oh my gosh. Because I had been so dark for so long that it was like,
everything was kind of
She was so excited that was supposed to be funny. I went, yes, it was supposed to be funny. And I went, hey, I'm coming back to you. I am coming. I'm sorry. I am coming back to you. And so for her, she was like, oh, finally. And she talks about now that we're on the other side, she talks about how hard those times were. And it was hard, her watching me, but it was also hard for her because, it is, I'm watching somebody I loved hurt and I don't have the thing that I can do to make him better.
Right.
He's playing with the kids, but he's not 100%. He's not 100% Ted right now. So if this was about how do you help your spouse cope with loss, I would say, here's a couple thoughts, as we were putting this together, because we always want to make this super applicable. A couple of thoughts is listen and don't fix. Like people go, I don't know what to say. I say, good. If you say, I do not know what to say, perfect. Don't worry about what you have to say. It is, I'm listening to you. I'm sitting right here. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to, you just say, God, you're hard. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's got to be so hard. So that run like a wounded dog from cliches. Like, Jesus must have wanted a flower or, that kind of, heaven needed another angel. They're in a better place. It's all for a reason. Like that doesn't help at all. And it makes you feel stupid for caring. And so stay away from cliches. I mean, some go-tos are like, I'm so sorry. And for what it's worth, I am praying for you. I don't know what to pray, but I love you and I'm praying for you. And I'm just so sorry. So, and because people, bless their hearts, they were trying to comfort us and they would say things like those kind of things. And I'd be like, oh, no, it doesn't help. And I think that's a pretty common thing. The other thing I would say to do is to realize that the everyday's different for somebody that's grieving. I mean, they may be like, hey, they're cracking jokes and they're back and it's so great. And then you go watch some television show and then you look over there, they're crying. You're like, what just happened? So know that, again, grief's like an ocean more than it is steps, and know that every day is going to be a little bit different. It hit me at weird times. Yeah, and it still happens. My oldest son just graduated high school and I was sad that she wasn't there. Like of all the emotions of him growing up and different things, I was like, where did that come from? I talked to her daughter, who I'm really close to, and she's got 2 sons, and she's missing her mom. She goes, I just want to ask my mom some things.
Is that helpful to have somebody that is kind of experiencing the same loss and that you're able to talk to?
I think so. And it's never exactly the same, but I think it's and her daughter grieved way differently than I was. She was 18. So she would take it in little steps. I said I'm an Old Testament griever, and she was a New Testament griever. Like I'm gnashing of teeth, ripping of clothes. She would take it she's taken it more in steps. So I've watched her over the years. Now, part of her grief is I want my mom here helping me with my kids and talking about my kids. And, he just started kindergarten and I want my mom to be excited. And so she's missing those things. Mm-hmm. I will text her or email her every year the day when she was born, my aunt's daughter, because I remember because I was 18 when she was born. And I will text her every year, this is what happened and these are the things. Because Nancy's mom's really great about traditions, and she will tell their birth story every year or what the day looked like. Not the birth story. Nobody wants to hear that story.
Right. Not too many details.
But I will do, and she says, I love this every time. There's a different detail every time. Mm-hmm. So I think it's being there with each other. I can never replace her mom, but just as her mom was oddly close to me and comforting to me, I think we are for each other. Mm-hmm. As she's gotten older, she can comfort me just as much as I can comfort her. Mm-hmm. So I think there's another person on the planet that cares as much. So yeah, I think that's key. And Nancy was close to my aunt too. Like she's got her own loss of her children having her.
Yeah.
And she would say we weren't as close, but she was pretty darn close. We always tease that she liked Nancy better than me now, kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's and for me to respect the fact that she's lost someone too, because you don't want to lose anyone that your kids love.
Right.
So you're grieving on so many levels. But yeah, I think that's part of it. Let them grieve in weird ways. Just calling my aunt's cell phone on her, that was really weird. She never went, that's bizarre. Why are you doing that? It's like whatever works for you, buddy. Right. You do you. You do you. Standing in the gaps, like saying, you know what? I know you were going to take the kids to wherever. Today's not a good day. I can tell it. You go do your thing, and I'm going to take them. Kind of standing in those kind of gaps. Just being their advocate and letting them cry, and they're going to repeat themselves. And if they're extroverted, they're going to repeat themselves a lot. And then I would say you got to take care of you too. Mm-hmm. Like it will drain you like no other. I imagine when your spouse has lost someone, and wow, are you having to be selfless, right? So it is take care of you, make sure you've got some friend that you can talk to and share with that this is hurting you too, and you're tired and those different things. So that'd be part of it too, is don't forget that you've got needs too. But so I think, it is one of those things that draws a couple together. It's probably going to happen to most of us. It feels like death when it happens, it feels like you're never going to be okay again. Mm-hmm. And she said that. As soon as I got the news, she said the first thought in her head was, he will never be the same. He will not be able to handle this. And so, but.
Do you feel like that's been true?
To a degree. To a degree. But here's the weird thing. Because of the way she handled it, we traded in one thing for something richer. Does that make sense? Like I'm a little bit more.
Like you're closer to Nancy now?
Yeah. I think we're closer than ever. There's the learned walking with a limp. All the people that have passed away, I got told in the middle of the night with my mom, my aunt, and my cousin. It was a wake-up call in the middle of the night. So if you wake this guy up in the middle of the night, you might get yourself punched. Like she surprised me for my 40th birthday to take me somewhere, and she's like, everybody is okay. Not wake up, everybody's okay. Everybody is okay, everybody. So we have those kind of residual PTSD stuff going on a little bit. But what we have now is richer. It's just a richer relationship because of that. It's a world that only the two of us know, that I didn't let anybody else in on. But there's things that still linger.
Yeah, and that's part of the beauty of marriage, that, it's great to have someone that you can go on dates with and have fun with and, live life with. But then there's that deeper, richer connection, that there's something intangible about knowing someone deeply and being deeply known and walking through some of these super intense seasons of life that just bonds you together and brings you together for the rest of your lives. And it can bring you closer together than ever. And that's part of, what we're talking about here, is that how you handle loss can either connect you or disconnect you from your spouse. And this is a situation that's going to happen to all of us. And hey, you can use it to either help the healing process for your spouse or hinder the healing process for your spouse. And you can use it to either, drive a wedge between you or bring you closer together.
Absolutely. Perfectly said.
And to piggyback on that, because I was kind of curious of the same thing, did you make a conscious decision like, I'm leaning on Nancy for this because I think, I mean, like you said, it can be something that kind of draws a wedge between you where you can say, I just want to be left alone. I don't want, and it can be really detrimental to your relationships. Do you feel like, were you aware that you were clinging to her, or did you make a decision to cling to her, or?
Well, that's a good question.
That is a perfect question. And what's so funny, and the reason I love the analogy that grief is like an ocean is sometimes I wasn't clinging to her. Sometimes I was being totally quiet. Sometimes I don't want to talk about this. Sometimes I would be quiet for a week. Sometimes I can cry in front of her. She just knew I was sad and gave me room to be sad and would say just a few things. How you doing? And sometimes how you doing would I'd fall apart.
That's all you needed. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so many different things. That's the thing with grief, and depending on the personality is she would let me, and sometimes I'd be frustrated or sometimes I'd be irritable. There would be all these different things. And so it wasn't as much of this thing of I'm going to cry and I'm going to extrovert and say all this stuff and you just need to sit here and bemoan the whole thing. It was more of like, I know she's there. I know she's got my back. I know I've got space to do this. I know she's not going to be frustrated with me. She's going to allow me to grieve however I need to grieve for the day. And that was the miraculous part of it is the poor thing didn't know what's coming in. And I wasn't mean. She would say that because you were never mean to me. You were never mean to us. You were just disconnected sometimes, or you were just sad. So she allowed those different emotions. And I think that's it. And it's so hard not to take it personal for people to feel like, gosh, why aren't we enough?
Right.
Like, why are we not enough for you? I mean, you've got everything to be thankful for. She could have said all those things to me, and not one person on the planet would have blamed her, right? Hey, listen, she would not want you doing like this. She would not want you being sad. We're here. These kids need you. You know how it is to lose a parent. Don't you dare. I mean, she could have came out with all of those, and no one would have blamed her.
Yeah.
But I think that would have prolonged the process even more.
Hindered the healing process.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And here was the thing, like, I don't know how to describe this, but a lot of this was internal angst on my part, right? And it didn't make me mean. It didn't make me unavailable. It made me different, and it made me odd. It made me, of course, I'm still odd, but for real during that time. And so it was just her unconditional, I'm not fixing anything. We're going to take it one step at a time. That, we're just going to live today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, this is, Ted, we appreciate you being, so forthcoming with your story and being transparent and vulnerable. And, I think this is helpful. And it's really, really, really hard. You can't put a formula on this stuff.
Right.
But you sharing your story and processing it and then, listening out some of these things like, hey, here's some things that might help is super helpful. And again, these are just things that might help. Like nothing's going to your, what we said at the very beginning, the goal is not to fix anything, but the goal is to support your spouse. And sometimes we just don't know where to start. And maybe here's a place to start when the situation does happen in your relationship, in your marriage, right?
Right.
So we do want to attempt to boil this very, very hard, heavy, big topic down to something that is more practical, is more tangible. Because here's the thing: is like this is all helpful when the moment happens or something does happen. We probably won't remember everything we just talked about, Ted, right? Sure. But maybe there is something we will remember. Maybe there is something that, hey, after the initial wave of grief has passed and that, a few days later, a week later, 2 weeks later, maybe something will come to mind and maybe it'll be this one simple thing. And what is that one simple thing?
Yeah. And when I thought about this episode, I thought, probably somebody is Googling this because they're in the middle of it. How do I help my spouse when they've lost a loved one? So I imagine a lot of people that are listening to this are listening to it out of like, oh, I'm in the middle of this.
Yeah.
Because if I'm listening to this on a weekly basis, I'm probably skipping this one. Right?
Yeah,
you know what? Life's hard enough. I'm skipping losing a loved one. I'm just being honest. That'd be me, right?
Sure, yeah.
I'd go right on to This American Life.
We've got all the
works.
The completists, though, who are listening to every episode. There are a few of those.
And we love you, completists.
All
right.
So I would say, if you're in the middle of this, if your spouse is in the middle of this, there is one question that you could ask, and It's just, how you doing? It's just, how you doing? And then just listen. Just listen. Ask lots of questions. Don't fix anything. To me, like, I've been in ministry forever, and my favorite small group leaders were always small group leaders that work with students that said, I don't have all the answers. I'm like, good, because if you do, we're not going to let you be a volunteer because we need you to listen. And so I think it's just listen to them. Just listen to them. Ask them how they're doing. And I've noticed that I've been in ministry my whole life, and you watch when someone's hurting, all you got to do is tee it up just a little. How you doing? And so that's kind of the joke at our house. I go, I saw so-and-so today. She goes, did you say how you doing? I said, Because then people, because a lot of people they just need somebody that's like saying, I'll listen, So I would just say, ask them how they're doing and just listen.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, again, Ted, we can't thank you enough for being open with your story and just sharing your experience, and Nancy's experience walking with you through this. I think this is super helpful stuff. So thank you. And thank you for listening to the Married People podcast. If this was helpful for you, or if you know somebody who's walking with a spouse through a situation like this, maybe consider sharing this episode with them. It might be a helpful resource for them when the time is right for them to listen. And as always, for more marriage resources, check out our website, marriedpeople.org. Until next time, I'm CJ.
I'm Afton.
I'm Ted.
And thank you for listening.